welcome back to another episode of Tuxedo Time, where we wear tuxedos, and it is time. Podcast edition.
My feet are hurting.
Why?
I don't know. They're really hot for some reason, probably from standing on the concrete down the studio.
Oh, yeah, that'll account for it. Remember when we were doing renovation? You got a hole in your sock. Remember when we were renovating the bathroom for 2 weeks straight?
Yes.
And both of our feet, both of our pairs of feet were hurting so bad.
Yes.
You guys will see that in a future video at some point.
Yeah. I have a massive hole in the heel of my socks right now, but I just need my slippers to be off for a few minutes.
You're a strill.
I know. We need to get smaller prop screens, by the way.
I know. They're massive, aren't they?
Yeah. All right. So in the last episode of Tuxedo Time, we asked you guys on YouTube to let us know if you had any topic suggestions for us. And one of the topic suggestions was the differences to do a podcast on the differences between living in Buffalo and living in Newfoundland, which I thought was kind of a fun and interesting topic that we could kind of have a quick discussion about.
So I guess Buffalo being a city and Newfoundland being a province.
Yeah. So I guess
would be equivalent to a state.
Yeah, I guess
for people who aren't familiar with how Canadian lands or regions are divvied up.
Yeah. So it's more so like living in Buffalo versus living in St. John's.
Yeah. So it would be Buffalo, New York, United States compared to St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada.
Correct.
Yeah. So Canada's the country. Newfoundland's the province. Technically Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah, we can't forget about Labrador.
Yeah. And St. John's is where we grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So differences. Do you have what were the first differences that you think of when off the top of your head?
I think the first massive difference that I've noticed is like the weather. Like there are 4 seasons in Buffalo, which I've never really experienced. Well, besides Vancouver, but I haven't really experienced 4 full seasons, like an actual fall, actual spring, so a winter that's not 9 months long, and like a hot summer.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because people who aren't familiar with Newfoundland, I find that because I lived in Texas before I lived in Newfoundland. Well, technically I lived in Newfoundland first, then I moved to Texas, then I moved back to Newfoundland, then we did Vancouver, then we did here.
Very confusing.
Yeah, it's very confusing. So I've lived all over the place, and I think this is actually probably, with the exception of New Jersey and Massachusetts, which I lived in.
Well, now you're just showing off.
When I was really little.
I'm just going to list off all of these states that I lived in.
I'm a world citizen. No, but I don't really remember living in those areas. Mm-hmm. But as far as all the places I remember living, this is the first place that I've lived that actually has had 4 discrete seasons.
Discrete?
Well, discrete in a sense that you think of... This isn't the
massage parlor, Chris.
I mean discrete as in separate, not as in
oh, okay,
under the table.
Okay. It's like they're really sneaky.
There are 4 sensual seasons here.
Did you not read the website before we moved to Buffalo? If you guys don't know what we're talking about, you need to go back and listen to what was that episode 15, the relationship Q&A episode. Everything will be explained.
Our clean, beautiful Asian Buffalonians.
That's something that I noticed here actually, is that there's not a lot of Asians that I've noticed. I know we lived in Vancouver, which is an unfair comparison, but even in Newfoundland and St. John's, we had a lot of exchange students, and there was a lot of Chinese people there, including your family.
Well, Memorial University they basically, you're stretching for your water. Memorial University had a huge recruitment effort over in China. So there was a lot of Chinese students from that. But even then, there was a landed immigrant Chinese community in Newfoundland that was fairly large. Mm-hmm. My family being one of them.
Yep.
But there's not. I guess there's not. I don't know what the Asian population here in Buffalo is.
Yeah.
But with that said, discrete seasons, not sensual seasons, discrete seasons. There, when I was a kid, I remember seeing the calendar flip, and every month had sort of a stereotypical motif at the top. And December would have all the Christmas stuff. January would be all snow. And then as you get into spring, everything would be green, St. Patrick's Day kind of stuff.
I don't like St. Patrick's Day.
And then you go into the summer and the bright sunny days. And then fall would have, of course, all the autumn colors. November, October. Mm-hmm. But I remember in Texas, we didn't get snow. So we had these ridiculous calendars up with snow on the top, but there was just no snow.
Oh my God. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I made a post on Instagram today talking about winter. Yeah. And a couple of people were like, oh, I live in Texas. We don't have winter. So
And then we moved back to Newfoundland.
And it was just winter. Every picture on the fucking calendar was just winter until July.
Winter. Yeah, exactly.
And then it was just like Fogust.
Yeah.
And then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even then, like in autumn in Newfoundland, some areas of the province are very beautiful because they do get leaves that change. But the majority of the trees I feel like are evergreens.
Yeah.
These little like gnarled old like pine trees that are like 3 feet tall because
spruce.
Black spruce.
I think so, yeah.
They're these like tiny little pinner trees because the wind is so strong.
Yeah, they just like can't grow because like the snow is also really.
And also I feel like there's a lot of rocky terrain, so maybe there's not an easy way to like embed themselves.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't know much about the plant life.
No, I don't either, but that makes sense.
Newfoundland.
I'm pretty sure that's right. There's so much like cliff that they're like the root systems are so shallow they can't go down, and so the wind either like blows them over or
like just making shit up.
Could be. I don't know. We don't fact check on this podcast, do we? I don't. Chris does.
Either way, autumn in Newfoundland doesn't look the same as like what you think about in autumn in like the New England area or like New York State.
Oh yeah, it's so different.
Yeah, but we have beautiful autumns in Buffalo.
Yeah, the accent is very different.
Of course.
Very different.
Yeah. Did you just think of the one similarity between Buffalo and here and home is the weather, or the one difference is the weather? Is that what you thought about?
Well, yeah, I probably should have given this more thought before we started recording. A difference that like you might not even think about is how easy it is to travel from, well, like when we're allowed to travel from Buffalo. Like getting anywhere off the island in Newfoundland is challenging, especially in winter. It's like 8 out of 10 times your flight's going to be delayed or canceled. And in Buffalo, it's just like so easy to get everywhere. Like Buffalo is like a hub. Like to get to New York is easy. To get to, like you can get a direct flight anywhere. And even like Toronto is just across the border, and you just like drive up and literally go anywhere.
Yeah.
Whereas like Newfoundland, like you have to take at least 1 flight or 2 flights to Halifax or Toronto, and then you're going.
Yeah. Another thing that's different is, I guess, how the cities are laid out, because they have a very similar, if you like the population of Buffalo, I think is actually pretty similar to the population of St. John's.
St. John's and surrounding, I think.
Yeah.
It's like Mount Pearl, Paradise, CBS.
But St. John's has a lot fewer large buildings than Buffalo does.
Yeah, there's no real like skyscrapers or tall buildings, because our downtown core is all like really old buildings from like the 1800s, 1900s.
Like heritage buildings.
Post the Great Fire time. When was that? 1982?
1892.
1982. Sorry. 1890. I'm dyslexic. 1892.
Yeah.
So, yeah, our buildings downtown aren't that tall, but they're all like super old. And a similarity between Newfoundland and Buffalo is that a lot of the architecture here is around that age as well.
Yeah.
Earlier, too, but like a lot of it is like, especially the houses are like 1900s era.
I think there's a lot more abandoned buildings here.
Yes.
Because similarly, I feel like industries did collapse in both places. Different industries, mind you.
Yeah.
Like Newfoundland is based on fishing. And then the cod moratorium occurred, and then the bottom fell out over there. And then I think they kind of pivoted to sort of offshore oil. But here, I guess like part of the Rust Belt or whatever, allegedly, I don't know much about the history of Buffalo. I've only been here for a little bit. But I mean, you went to museums and all that. And they talked about the grain silos and all those abandoned areas, which are just now becoming repurposed.
Totally. But I think the arse fell out over here in like the 30s.
Like Great Depression era?
Great Depression era, yeah. Yeah, the architecture's interesting. There's a lot, like I'm really into that stuff and would love to know more about architecture. I just don't really. But here, yeah, you're getting like a lot of these like factories. We don't have factories.
Right.
In Newfoundland.
Remnants of a bygone era.
Yeah. And even like I've seen a lot of like Art Deco era stuff here. Never saw that home.
Scatter few buildings. Remember that one that was right across from that parking lot? It's like bright pink and white.
I think they called it South Beach something now. I don't know if they're turning it into like condos or something. That's like a very 80s building, but it looks like Art Deco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Art Deco revival. Yeah, but here, so the population numbers are very similar, but the actual footprint of the city is a lot bigger here, I feel like.
Yeah. I feel like the city of Buffalo is made for like 1 million people.
I thought someone said that to us when we moved here. Like they're like, it's a city that's made for 1 million people, but there's only like a quarter of that here.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because that was one of the first things that the first impressions, like we came here interviewing for a job. We came from Vancouver, and I remember you first first thing you said to me was, where the hell is everybody?
There was nobody on the street.
It's like a ghost town around here. And it was really weird. It weirded you out.
It was crazy. We stayed at the mansion on Delaware, which is like close to stuff. We were like, it was like Delaware, Chippewa area where there's coffee shops, there's stuff happening. And I walked there and like walked up to Allentown because everyone's like, Allentown is this like bustling, walk up there for shopping and restaurants. And I like there was,
it was like a ghost town.
And I was like, where is everybody?
Yeah.
And that freaked me out big time.
Well, I mean, but realistically, you're a hermit anyway. So
yeah, true. I guess coming from Vancouver where it was like busy.
Yeah, like Vancouver was like a very hustle bustle city, like any other city you expect, like Toronto, New York.
Yeah,
just
not as crazy, but
not as crazy, no, and a lot cleaner too.
Oh my God, Vancouver's so clean.
But we're not talking about Vancouver. We're talking about St. John's.
Vancouver so much. Yeah, we're talking about St. John's and Buffalo.
Other differences is geography.
Yes.
Big difference in geography. Like Newfoundland, it's almost like Ireland. It's like cliffs, ocean,
fog,
beautiful vistas.
I'm so homesick.
Oh, how long has it been since you've been home?
A year and a half. Far too long. But we were supposed to go home and then Snowmageddon happened.
Yep.
Which is like another, going back to the weather, like we get hit hard in Newfoundland with snowstorms. And
now we get snow here too.
We do.
Compared to the rest of the country, people think Buffalo gets hit really bad with snow. But compare that to Canada.
Yeah. And then Newfoundland, where you get this like really mild, weird coastal weather where it like, we get a snowstorm, then it rains and it ices over, then we'll get another snowstorm and then it just gets really messy. So Snowmageddon happened. They had, I can't remember if they had 2 or 3 snowstorms in a week or something, and they got dumped on.
I think they set a record for the century, didn't they?
I think so, yeah. I don't remember the details, but
we were supposed to travel right when that happened.
And our flight got canceled. They had no flights. Like they couldn't even drive on the streets for a week.
Yeah.
They had no flights going in or out of the city.
Didn't Mrs. give birth? Because she went to the hospital on a skidoo.
Hopped on a skidoo and had to go to the hospital to give birth, which is crazy. But so Snowmageddon happened, and then COVID happened, and and
then we scheduled to go home in. We
were supposed to go home in.
Was it March?
January, March, May, and July, and we couldn't.
All 4 trips canceled.
All 4 trips, yeah. Which I mean, obviously, COVID, we're not going to go, but God, I don't know when we're going to get to go again. But this isn't about COVID.
It's not about COVID.
This is about the differences and similarities between the two. So we talked a lot about differences.
Geography-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, here it's a lot more flat.
Oh, yeah. You mean like terrain-wise?
Yeah, like elevation-wise, terrain-wise.
Yeah. It's funny because, Newfoundland's definitely really rocky. Like in Buffalo and just outside of Buffalo, like it's pretty flat, but you're getting like big trees. And not evergreens. They're like, some are if you've planted them, but a lot of them are just like, is it coniferous?
Coniferous are cones.
So deciduous?
Deciduous.
Okay, so there's a lot of really big deciduous trees here.
Yes.
There are not a lot of those in St. John's. And we had this like vision of building a cabin, and we had always envisioned this cabin like being nestled in these like high trees. And when we think about what we wanted to build in St. John's, it was just not possible, or outside of St. John's, because we don't have trees like that on the island. And even our evergreens are not tall because, like we said, with the weather. So here in Buffalo, we're getting deciduous trees that are big that, but there's not a lot of evergreens like in Vancouver because evergreens were everywhere.
Yeah.
There. But then you have like these weird canyons down here.
You do, yeah. So there's not like mountains or anything here, but there's you have a few gorges, not
gorges.
They're kind of like gorges. They're like river gorges, kind of.
Yeah.
Not as big as the ones that we flew through, say, on the west coast of Newfoundland, or even the south coast of Newfoundland when we did our trip. But you do have a couple areas like that are very geographically interesting. Yeah. Literally just 2 that I can think of that are close to us, though. Because there's Zor Valley and there's basically Letchworth State Park. Yeah. Those are basically the 2 areas.
And then there's like Watkins Glen, and there's a couple other places.
That was a little bit
Niagara
farther
Falls
out.
And stuff. It's funny because like coming from Vancouver, I was really worried because it's like Buffalo, like what is there anything around there to see and do like nature wise? And then when I started looking, I was like, oh, there's like some really unique stuff.
Oh yeah,
like around here, like the gorges, like Letchworth and Zor Valley.
Eternal Flames Falls is a really, really nice little hike. Yeah. Beautiful woods. That's sort of like not cleared, but it's very easy to walk through. Lots of nice mature trees. nice walk up the creek bed, and then there's this random gas vent that's a naturally occurring natural gas vent that's coming out of a crack in the rocks behind a waterfall. So it's basically lit and just perpetually being fed by natural gas from the earth. And it's this, I think it's apparently the only flame behind a waterfall, like natural gas vent behind a waterfall like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. And then like moving further towards like New York City, you have like the Catskills and the Adirondacks and stuff.
Finger Lake region before that.
Oh yeah, Finger Lakes.
We've not been to the Adirondacks yet.
No, I know. We need to like go. I think when COVID's over, I'd really like to spend some time on that side of the state and then like Vermont, Maine area. But definitely like I'd love to hang out in the Catskills, maybe rent a dope little cabin or something. That'd be sick.
Yep. So lots to see and do, but just different stuff.
Completely different vibes. Like it's definitely more industrial, green silos, a little more gritty down here. And like Newfoundland is very like rugged and like fishing boats and like lobster traps everywhere. I
feel like the rural areas in Newfoundland are very rugged, almost like fishing, old fishing villages.
Yeah.
Whereas here, the rural areas it's like farmland.
Farmland, yeah. You don't see a lot of farmland, if any, in Newfoundland. It's all like barrens or forest or mountain or cliff.
Did you have any Did you have any funny moments, like trying to get used to different cultural aspects of living here?
Like the things that we say, like in our vocabulary, like if you guys watch our YouTube videos or listen to the podcast, like you'll probably pick up on a couple of things that we say, like weird sayings that are very much Newfoundland. Yes, bye, that's deadly. Best kind, things like that. A couple of times just like being out and around and like saying something and people being like, what? Like one time I was at the grocery store and a guy was working there and he was in my way and he was like, oh, sorry, and like moved. And I was like, you're best kind. And he was like, looked at me and he was like, what? And I was like, I
don't have the emotional energy to explain this.
Yeah. Well, I'm from the island off the east coast of Canada. And they're like, don't want to hear the story anymore. Turn around, bye. But yeah, I mean, that's like it. Like trying to sometimes like talk to people and then people are like, I don't know what the fuck that you just said. And you're like, oh wait, well this means this thing and this means that. And so you have to kind of think about what you're saying culturally. But like, I also found that the people here are pretty similar to home.
In certain ways, definitely.
Yeah.
So similarities are, I think I have drawn some parallels between here and Newfoundland.
Yeah. Well, wait, before we move on to that, did you find any cultural things?
I don't know. I grew up in the U.S., so
I was scared, to be honest with you, like moving to the U.S. and knowing about the shootings and the dark things that happen.
People,
like very much
a lot more people down here are super into guns.
Yeah.
Like into guns because they're into guns.
Yeah.
And that I feel like in Canada, a lot of people own guns, but it's mostly like hunting rifles and, guns. They look at guns more as tools rather than the guns themselves being the hobbies. You know, like the hobby for a lot of people in Newfoundland would be like, oh, I use it to go hunting, rather than the hobby being, I'm just into guns. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like back home, I've never gone into a movie theater or mall and been worried about getting shot. Right. Down here, I've had like one time I was at the Diarrhea Mall and something happened where somebody, like they were doing some kind of test security thing and they sent the wrong message or something and they shut down the mall and nobody was telling anybody anything, but they were telling everybody to get out.
Oh, the mall got locked down while you were in it.
While I was in it, the mall got locked down. And the first thing I thought of was active shooter.
Yeah.
I'm in the U.S., active shooter.
Right. And that's not a Buffalo specific thing. That's more of a US specific phenomenon.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's like terrifying. And also like getting used to like, don't go into this part of town because you might get hurt. Yeah.
There's not really any quote unquote bad places to go. I don't want to say bad places because that's kind of an unfair connotation, but there's no places that you would really be unsafe going to and actually fear for your life.
Yeah. Like there's a few places in on the east coast of Newfoundland, towns that maybe you wouldn't want to be in after dark, but like the threats are probably not as bad as some places in a bigger city. Like
I got beaten up and jumped in one of the
in Mundy Pond.
Yeah, one of the sketchier parts in St. John's because we were riding bikes at night trying to film a video.
And we had gear and we had a car and it was just like we were Target.
Right.
Yeah.
But like I never thought, oh, these people are going to kill me and steal my shit. Like they're just a bunch of hoodlums who were just, like out to like wreak havoc, and it's like, oh, I got punched in the head a couple times and they tried to steal my bike. But it's like, I never thought for a second one of them's going to pull a knife on me and stab me, or they're going to pull a gun on me or shoot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas most people here wouldn't venture into certain parts of town, especially after dark, randomly on the street, because literally you might get killed.
Yeah. I was afraid, like when I moved down here, it took me a very long time to get comfortable to even walk by myself during the day because you hear horror stories like people pulling guns while you're driving because you cut them off or you beeped at them or something. So
actually, my neighbor in Texas, I remember when we were living in Texas, my mom told me a story. Mr. was driving down whatever the highway was, and someone like either cut him off and he beeped, or he cut someone off and they got mad. So there was some sort of road rage instance where the person pulled up next to him, pulled out a pistol, pulled a gun.
Yeah, it's fucking terrible.
And flashed a gun at him like on the highway. It's like, are you kidding me? Like what is, and this isn't meant to be political. This is just fact that there is a major discrepancy between the United States and other developed nations on the number of guns and the number of crimes related to firearms down here. And it's just the fact of the matter. Like whether it be just because there's more guns per capita than anywhere else, I don't know. But it's definitely a big part of the culture here.
Definitely.
And something that was atypical to us and things we didn't really have to think about when we were in Canada.
Yeah. And when you hear about it on the news and then you move into a city, you're really hyper aware.
Yeah. And also too, like across from where I work, like I work at one of the hospitals here, and there's a church right across the street, and there's a daily counter that says days since last homicide, and that they just keep going up in the days. I guess they go on a streak where there's been no killings, and then like I've never seen it past like 30 days. It just resets.
I've never seen it past 10, but I haven't been up that way a lot.
Yeah, like
every time I'm there, it's like 0 or 1.
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, it's crazy. But let's move on from the dark stuff. So similarities, we're getting into that. Why don't you tell me some similarities that you noticed?
Okay, one random one is that they have fish fry down here, which, as far as I can tell, is indistinguishable from fish and chips.
It's basically fish and chips.
It's basically fish and chips.
But I don't think it's cod. I think it's halibut.
Yeah, it's like a white fish fried, like beer battered with French fries.
Yeah. The problem about being from Newfoundland, and I think people from Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI would also feel the same way.
Yeah.
Very difficult to eat seafood anywhere and be like, this is perfect.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
we're spoiled.
When you're spoiled and you live in a coastal town and you are literally eating fresh fish that's caught that day or recently.
Yeah.
It's hard to go elsewhere and have seafood.
Do you remember the time that you and I went to Basho? There's a sushi restaurant. It's like a higher end sushi restaurant in St. John's. And they do like more expensive sushi, but like really nice. It's a really nice place.
Yeah. And
I think you knew somebody who worked there who was like working in the back, and they had just caught a tuna earlier that day.
Oh yeah.
And they had split the tuna up between like 4 of the nice restaurants in St. John's. And we were allowed to like peek in the kitchen and see them cutting the tuna for the sushi.
Oh yeah.
Like that's the type of fish that we're talking about. It was massive and it was beautiful, but I'd never seen like a tuna before. I didn't realize they were so big, but like the red dark meat, and they were like cutting it up and sharing it. It was just really cool to see like they just caught that and we just ate it. But then also how they split it up between a couple of the restaurants, and it was just a very cool like communal thing.
Yeah. And Newfoundland's very, it's interesting because I think from a per capita standpoint, they have a lot of really high-end restaurants. And I think a lot of it kind of springs from the fact that, the farm to table movement has been big as of late. And talk about places that are unique and can, that they're so remote when it comes to getting in fresh ingredients. It's almost farm to table out of necessity.
Yeah. And like when I think of farm to table, I think of like, greens and things like that. But like, you can't grow that stuff all year round in Newfoundland. So we're talking moose. We're talking
lots of root vegetables.
Yeah. And just really interesting stuff like foraged stuff from like mushrooms.
Chanterelle mushrooms.
Yeah, it's really cool. I just hit my mic. Sorry. Yeah, it's just, that's kind of unique. I've definitely missed that aspect of like collected, homegrown foods and fancy restaurants. Yeah.
And then also too, like Vancouver has also is a mecca or a hub for food too. So I feel like we were spoiled in places that we were previous to this.
Yeah, but there definitely been a lot of like pretty good restaurants here. I was surprised. I didn't expect to find as many good restaurants as we did find.
No, definitely.
And
not.
they keep popping up, which is like a really good thing for Buffalo. Like it seems like there's a new restaurant every, few weeks, few months.
And that's another similarity too. I feel like Buffalo's sort of on the other end of it now. I feel like they're kind of coming out of that doom and gloom, and there's been a big revival here, and people are excited about it. There's new stuff popping up, well, save for the pandemic, but before the pandemic, there was new restaurants popping up all the time, new businesses, new establishments, and it just felt like a lot of young people were moving back. I feel like Newfoundland is sort of still in that little bit of a slump, especially now with COVID.
Yeah, and I think it's going back down with like the oil and gas stuff.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
because their economy now is basically tied to the price of oil, so that's kind of a bummer for them. So I think when everybody can travel again, I really do think that Newfoundland probably will pivot to a more tourism thing. Yeah. It's only going to get more well-known with, the advent of social media, and they'll be able to share these remote locations, and people see those pictures on, like, say, Instagram. They say, oh, I want to go there. I have to go here.
It's funny because, like, I don't know if it's because I have a lot of Newfoundland pride and I love my province so much that maybe other people are like, why would I go there? But I'm surprised that, people are going to the Faroe Islands and, Azores and like all these crazy remote places. Iceland became this huge thing.
Right. But I think it's only a matter of time,
why
though.
Are people going to Newfoundland? Because like it's the culture and the landscape, like it's stunning and it's in Canada and nobody really knows about it and nobody ever talks about it. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm just biased because I think it's amazing.
Well, I think we both are. But at the same time, I think if you look at it objectively, the content that's created by like the Newfoundland tourism companies or the Newfoundland tourism board or whatever, like they've done a really good job with creating stunning visuals that represent the island. And I think has created a lot of buzz. But I think
it's also like they're targeting kind of like an older generation as well, though.
Right.
Like it's a lot of TV ads. It's a lot of ads like in the physical airplanes. Like I haven't seen them do a whole lot of social media campaign. I've seen a handful. Right. But not a lot.
I think it's there's a barrier for entry being an island. Yeah. I mean, same with Faroe Islands, same with Iceland.
But like all those places are so much further away.
That's true. I don't know. Maybe Newfoundland will have its day.
Maybe.
But I think Buffalo too, at this point, is becoming more well known. I'm sure that more people travel here now than they did 10 years ago.
Oh, definitely. Well, especially now that it's like, I think it's like a little bit past up and coming now, but even like where we lived previously before we bought this house, like people were saying like 5 years ago you wouldn't be caught dead down there because you would get shot. Yeah. And now you go walk down there by yourself. There's coffee shops and breweries and distilleries popping up all over the place down there.
Oh, gentrification.
I mean, yeah, it's like it sucks, but also it's good for the city because hopefully people will come back. But to tie that in, another similarity, I think, is that people from Buffalo and people from Newfoundland have an immense amount of hometown pride, like more than I've seen, I feel like, from other
100%.
Other provinces and states.
And that was one of the first things that I noticed when I moved down here. And it was in that kind of like transition period where like both of us were a little bit unsure. But what gave me sort of a little bit of kind of calmed me a little bit was seeing how much hometown pride people from Buffalo had. And like you said, more than most other cities that I've been to, with the exception of St. John's or Newfoundland in general. And, when I would go to work and I would ask people like, oh, like where because they'd ask where I was from, I'd say, and then I'd say, are you from here? And they say, oh yeah, I just moved from the city, but I'm originally from Buffalo. Right. Or if someone newly moved to Buffalo, I was like, oh, where'd you come from? And they'd say, oh, I moved from the city, but I'm originally from Buffalo. And probably 90% of people who I was interested in asking them where they came from, they're all from here.
That's crazy.
Or like Western New York. It's like, oh, I'm from like, I don't know, Fredonia, or I'm from, Jamestown. I'm from Western New York. And I'm just living here in Buffalo because this is my home region. Right. And there's that, like you said, that immense hometown pride, which Newfoundlanders also have.
Oh yeah, big time.
And it's very hard too, from a recruitment standpoint, to get people to go to either city, I feel like. Yeah. Like definitely. When I was hired down here, they basically said, like, you're like probably the 9th or 10th person we've interviewed. and I don't think very many people are interested in relocating to Buffalo.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, really? They're like, yeah, it's just not really, it's just not a sought after destination, like, you know, New York City or Vancouver or whatever.
Right.
But that's the same with Newfoundland.
Totally. Didn't you have a friend who like came from Ottawa and he like was not interested in being there, but then he moved away and then he was like, oh, I wish I could go back.
See, but I think he made the most of it. He was a radiologist who worked. He was a new hire when I was a resident. He was as an attending, and he was hired as an attending when I was a resident. But you know, I feel like he and his family had a really good outlook on and made the most of their move. I just don't think that they were close to family, and I think that's
always a challenge. I find
100%
that
true.
The biggest challenge about living down here is not being close to family.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't go to Newfoundland for the weather.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah. But people from Newfoundland are always trying to come home, it seems like. And a lot of people leave because of work, including us.
Yep.
But yeah, that was definitely a parallel, was the number of people who were coming home into both cities.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's people who want to be in those cities are from those cities.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You were telling me something earlier over here about how you felt about moving.
Oh yeah, that was an interesting. Yeah, us moving was an interesting time. Just it kind of forces you to think about things in a real philosophical manner, you know.
Yeah.
But I remember we had never given thought to where we were going to live because we just assumed it was going to be Newfoundland, and then Vancouver we were living temporarily, but we liked it there because it was such a sought after place.
Yeah.
So for like Newfoundland, for example, I always viewed Newfoundland in a way that I thought was sort of special. Like I knew that like mainland Canada never really most people would never want to go to Newfoundland.
Yeah.
And I knew that, but at the same time, I felt like Newfoundland was like a really good, well-kept secret. And it was just a special place in that respect.
Yeah.
You know, the landscape was so unique. The people, you know, are great. It's just a completely different culture. And I felt that was like a special area, and I just felt it was very unique. Then like Vancouver, I felt, you know, it was just Vancouver. It was such a sought after place. That was just special in and of itself.
And it was like this big, majestic city in Canada that you and I had never seen before.
Right. And then
like we'd been to every other province except for like the Northwest Territories and Yukon and stuff, but we'd never been to BC.
Yeah. And like we rolled into Vancouver and there was just this like sprawling bay, this harbor of ocean. And then in the backgrounds there were these mountains and didn't even look real.
Whoa.
Like it looked fake.
Yeah. It's like mountain life meets beach life with like no harsh winters and summers that are perfect.
It's like a cooler, temperature-wise, Canadian version of California.
Yeah.
It's kind of
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so that was always special. And then when the prospect came of moving, I realized I was like, I've never thought about living anywhere else. And like every time, like, you know, like it's like when you're hungry and you're like trying on food in your mind, you're like, I want this. And you try it on in your head. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You like pretend that you're eating it and you're like, is this what I want right now?
Is this sitting well with me?
Yeah.
And I realized I'd never done that with a city.
Yeah, me either, really.
Until like we really started thinking, okay, Buffalo could be the spot. It's like, it looks like the job's good. You know, it's a decent cost of living. We're sort of centrally located. We can get home easily. And then it was like, wait a second, Buffalo. I don't know anything about Buffalo.
Yeah.
And then like, what's special about it? As if like I had to have like as if a place had to be special for me to live there, which sounds so stupid.
Yeah.
but
I get it though, because like you want to make sure that you're going to be happy there. We knew Vancouver was going to be special because of everything we heard about it and everything we knew about it. We knew Newfoundland was special because we lived there.
Right. And when I verbalize it, I kind of sound like a little bit of a brat, you know?
But no, not really. Because I mean, it's a big life choice to pick everything up and move to a new country or a new city. Like you kind of want to know.
No, definitely.
Like, is this going to be worth the effort? Or am I better off looking somewhere else that's going to give me more bang for my
but I think
convenience?
Maybe a better, more accurate way to put it was that when part of your persona and your identity is based on your hometown or your culture where you're from, and that's stripped away from you,
yes,
you feel like part of you has been changed or altered, or you feel like you're losing part of you.
100%. Oh, I still kind of feel like that. Sometimes I feel like a bit of a fish out of water because I feel like I'm supposed to be in Newfoundland.
Yeah. And I think from me, like my standpoint, like as a kid, I spent, you know, a lot of years in Texas and, you know, that's just where we lived, but I never really considered that part of my persona. Right. So I thought a lot about what where you live and what it means to you as a person, or what it means to me as a person, I've realized, and I came to terms with it, and it took a little bit of time and a little bit of, thinking to realize or become to the conclusion that you can be happy anywhere. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
And I kind of rationalize it by then like looking around and thinking, okay, hold on a second. Just look how massive North America is, and the world is, for example. Yeah. But like you look at every single town, city, village, whatever, there are people there who are fiercely passionate about that place, who maybe there are people there who aren't fiercely passionate about it, but they're happy because they have a good life.
Yeah.
And I realized like where you're from it can be part of your identity, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And moving somewhere else and living somewhere else doesn't mean you have to give up that identity either. Mm-hmm. So it took a while for me to come to terms with that.
That's deep.
Well, anyway, that was like that was that internal struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was an internal struggle for me as well, because I was so connected to Newfoundland and felt like that was me. And like, I feel like had we come down here and I just decided, no, I'm not going to have like an open mind and just see what's happening. Like things could have gone completely different. And as you said, like you could be happy anywhere. And I think that your mindset makes or breaks that.
Yep.
Kind of
100%.
Because like you and I both said before we moved here, like we're going to go in with open mind. We're going to embrace it. And then and I think having the out of like in 6 months, we'll both check in with each other and see how we're doing. Because it wasn't like, okay, this is it now. Like,
right. Nothing. We looked at it realistically. Like, look, we have no kids.
Yeah.
We're renting an apartment. Nothing's permanent.
Yeah.
If we don't like it after, we'll give it a year.
Yeah.
And if either of us isn't happy, regardless of what the other person says, we're gonna find another job somewhere else. Yeah. Try another city.
And I think after 6 months, that's when like what you just said, like that's when I realized like, oh, it's not really about the place. It's like about who you're with, I think, and like what you're doing.
Yeah. Place is just a name.
Yeah, totally. And I think we made the most of it. I think like having friends here helps. And after
3 months, you were like, I love it here. I've met people who are amazing, people who share the same interests as me. I've connected really well with them.
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing about moving to like a bigger city, or a city that's like connected to a bigger city, is like you get a variety of people who are into different stuff. Like you're a big weirdo. Well, thanks. I have a lot of really nice friends from Newfoundland. But I don't, like off the top of my head, can't think of like any of my friends who are into the same things at like doing YouTube and social media and blogging. I have friends who are photographers. I have friends who are graphic designers. I have friends who are dancers, but like none of them really are into like making the content for the social media.
Yeah.
And I just happen to find people here who are like into that or like want to be into that.
Yeah. And it's not to say you can't have close contacts that are...
Oh, I think our main camera just died.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, anyway, you don't have to have friends who are into the same stuff, but
no,
it definitely makes like it easier. I mean, I came down here and one of the first times I hung out with Pat and Billy and Lindsay was like at like a Perry's ice cream event at a marketing company.
Right.
Because she was doing like some social media stuff and blogging, and so was Pat, and Pat was doing YouTube at the time. And I was like, oh, like we're all kind of doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
And it's fun to like be around people. It's inspiring to be around people who are doing the same stuff as you.
Yep.
It motivates you to do stuff.
Oh, 100%. And that's definitely a difference. I feel like, when you're in a town that's it's the same size, but you have so much larger reach when you're kind of connected to the mainland. And that's something that was always difficult in Newfoundland. Getting off and on the island was difficult.
Yeah.
So it's like, what you got is what you got. You order something online, it's going to take a week or more to get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that place? It gets lost somewhere in deep New Brunswick.
Yeah. What is it? DIPPE?
Yeah. I remember it was like a black hole that I always would dread seeing on the tracking, because it would be like, oh, deep New Brunswick. And then it would be there for like 2 weeks.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, totally. My mom sent me a bench and some stuff from the house, and she was like, she's like, I just tracked it. It's in that place in New Brunswick, and I was like, oh no,
the black hole.
Yeah, the black hole. But no, all the stuff came. Yeah. But I will say though, it's extremely difficult living in a city without family.
Yeah,
and I like really miss them and being with them. And it's really great to have friends who are like doing the same stuff as you, but like also it's really hard not to have family. And just have like, it's like two different types of connections that you kind of need. And I wish I could have both of them in the same city, but
yeah, that's interesting. I think I do think that's a cultural thing though. Like I've said it before, I think on this podcast, you know, when I was 9 years old, Mom said, you're halfway there. You're halfway to leaving me.
Yeah. Oh.
I was like, halfway, where, Mom? She's like, halfway to leave me. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, when you're 18, you're going to grow up and go away to college and you're never coming home again.
Joke's on your mother. You stayed there until like you were 27.
Yeah. She was like, okay, kicking you out now.
Until I dragged your ass out of there. You were like, but at Mama's milk.
Oh, gross. I
want to stay with Mama.
No, ew.
And it was like, all right, Chris, time to get the Jesus.
Yeah, you wanted a house.
I did want a house.
Yeah, and Mom says you can't have MD after your initial. You can't have MD after your name and still live at home.
Live at home. Yeah,
I was like, but think all the money I can save. I can pay down all this. And
cheap Dr. Nicholas.
You know what? I'm frugal.
Yeah. Do you want to do a quick round of That's Friggin' Deadly and just pick two deadly things, one from Buffalo and one from St. John's. One from St. John's that you miss, that you wish you could have, and one that makes Buffalo fun or exciting or that you love. Like, it could be anything, place that you frequent, a restaurant, a location, anything about either. We need that on the board.
Yeah, really. We should put that in the sound effects sequencer.
Yeah, we should.
Why don't you start and I'll think of some.
Okay. Not counting like family, like a thing. Something that I think is deadly in Newfoundland that I miss is a store called Sam Design.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. So my friend Susan, she owns Sam, and I used to do freelance work, and she was one of my clients, and we became friends. That's for that camera that just died. And we became friends, and I think we're friends. Hopefully Susan thinks we're friends too.
She's like, we're not friends.
But I used to shoot for them all the time and do design work for them. But like
So you used to do graphic design and photography for them, and they were interior designers.
And they were interior designers, and they had like a furniture showroom. So, and
all the juicy stuff you love.
And it was all the modern stuff. Like every furniture that we have in this house now that you see on our Instagram, like Sam carries it.
Right.
Yeah.
You were influenced very
heavily by them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I, at the time, was like blogging, and I like was really interior design obsessed, didn't know a lot, started working with Sam, and started shooting all the properties that they designed in their showroom and doing some Instagram for them and just like working on stuff and just like became absolutely infatuated with design and interior design, and furniture and stuff.
I love how you use the word design interchangeably, meaning graphic design, interior design. Yeah.
It's very confusing. And so watching their showroom and their business grow from the internet, like from away, because like I think they were a nice 2 years old when we left, but they've expanded the showroom.
Yeah.
They have more staff. They're carrying like local goods, but they're also carrying like all this beautiful stuff. And, you know, they're always on Instagram stories showing like their new layouts and stuff. And it's just really amazing to see them, their continued success. But I also like really miss, because there's nothing in Buffalo like that. Like every bit of furniture that I buy for this house, I have to order because nobody carries it here.
There's not a lot of, that's a similarity actually, because there isn't a lot of, not that I'm aware of, modern design places here.
There's not. There's like two that carry some stuff, but like it's not like.
But similarity wise, I feel like people in Buffalo, like people in St. John's, a lot of them prefer traditional interior design.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just around the world. I don't know.
Is it, or do you think it's because like there's a lack of presence of modern
chicken or the egg thing? But like, I mean, in Vancouver, there's a ton of modern places. Toronto, a ton of places. Yeah. I mean, it's just the fact that it's a big urban area and you're going to get more people who are sort of into modern design like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely Newfoundland and Western New York both have a very traditional sort of lean on their interior design.
Yeah. Now Sam has it covered in St. John's.
Right.
Now we need somebody in Buffalo, but that's something that's friggin' deadly.
Okay.
From home.
What about here?
Well, you're not going to do yours from home, or you're still thinking?
Okay. That's friggin' deadly for at home is the landscapes.
Oh, yes.
The landscapes there. it's like, don't get me wrong, there's beautiful places here, and Western New York, like we were talking about before, is a beautiful place, especially during the fall. But as far as like we find so much beauty in those rugged cliffs and the rugged coastline of Newfoundland. And just if we were home and being able to explore all that, like that would be absolutely amazing. Yeah,
I agree. I miss that. And I miss like the fog and the cliff and just like traveling around the island, just fucking off for a weekend and going up to Fogo or something, out to Gander. That's it. Okay. That's Friggin Deadly for Buffalo.
You're up.
Oh, great. I think there's a lot of things, but something that sticks out to me is the architecture. I have always been obviously obsessed. I've talked about this before with architecture since I was a kid. I wish I knew more about it, and I am about to know more about it. But I always wanted to have a loft, like an industrial loft, like since I was a kid.
A loft conversion?
A loft conversion. And to live now in a city where like that's a real, like there are literal industrial buildings that people have turned into lofts, like and apartments, like it's here. And when we first came here, and I remember driving by these old abandoned lofts or like lofts that had been like converted, warehouses that have been converted into like apartments. I was like, I cannot believe like this is real, that I'm seeing it, that I'm standing here and looking at these like industrial
stuff
windows
you saw on TV shows as a kid.
This brick, but yeah, and it was just mind boggling. And it's just cool to learn about the history, like I said, with like the Art Deco buildings, like the City Hall building is Art Deco and the Grand Central Terminal. And then, you know, Hotel Henry, just the architecture here. There's just such a variety, and it's fascinating.
So it's interesting. It's very interesting that is a drawing point now, because I feel like the abandoned building and old style architecture created this feeling that when you initially came here, it made you think like, where the hell am I?
I think it was like, the fact that they were abandoned, but also like the silos and stuff. It definitely gave like, because there are parts of the city that do look very sketchy. Like Michigan Avenue, like there's a bunch of like industrial buildings there that are all kind of like in really bad shape.
Yeah.
But then there are some other ones like down around Ohio Street that have been converted and are beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like kind of a mix. Like at first, yeah, you're right. It was kind of like really scary, but then like
that contributed to the foreign feeling of the city and how different it felt.
Definitely.
You know what it felt like actually when we first moved here, with all like especially with the City Hall building, it felt like Gotham City.
Yeah, it kind of did feel like that. It felt very dark. Like when I think about that era, I feel like everything seemed like it was like cloudy and dark.
Because we moved here in the fall.
Yeah, and I think I was also really emotional about everything too.
Yeah, like it was November when we first moved here. So the days were short, so the nights were often early, and it would be like these moody clouds over the city. I remember driving through downtown.
Thunder and lightning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So much thunder and lightning.
Yeah. So that's Friggin Deadly for Buffalo is probably the opportunity that's been afforded to me and us. And you know, when we were looking for jobs, I guess it's just supply and demand.
Yeah.
When you get a city that you're having a hard time recruiting people to, you're going to have to entice people, and you know, like compensation wise, whatever. And we basically picked Buffalo because it had a really good job offer. Yeah. You know, and that gave us the opportunity to sort of jumpstart our lives and get to where we want to be faster.
Right.
And if we had moved back to Newfoundland, we would be probably a lot worse off financially. Now, I'm not saying we're bad off by any means, or we're bad off anywhere, but we wouldn't be nearly where we are now. Yeah. And, you know,
So I talk basically, about like between the lines, the Millennial Falcon would not exist.
Well, that's just exactly it.
Yeah.
Like we were back in Canada, and we'd have all this beautiful landscape, but I talk about beautiful landscapes always in the setting of exploring them with a helicopter.
Right. But the catch-22 is that if we were back in Newfoundland, we wouldn't have a helicopter. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy when you think about that.
It is. Yeah. I think like coming here, that was definitely a draw. Like not only was the opportunity great for your job, but like the real estate here is very affordable compared to Vancouver, Toronto, St. John's even. Yep. To be able to get the house that we're living in now, like, it's insane. Not that this house was cheap by any means, but like what we paid for this house,
you'd pay more for elsewhere.
You'd pay probably 2 or 3 times more in Toronto.
Yeah, not in Toronto, but not in St. John's.
Not in St. John's, no. Probably about the same in St. John's.
Yeah. But, also too, like working in America and getting paid in American dollars.
Yeah.
You're used to an exchange rate, and that exchange rate has, since we moved down here, the exchange rate has gotten worse for Canadians, better for us.
Yeah.
So even that way, like most of our debt was in Canadian dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally watched, as the exchange rate widened, I just watched my debt shrink.
Yeah.
Just through the exchange rate.
Right.
So like all that stuff has been favorable for us to the detriment of all of our family in Canada.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But yeah.
But it's definitely set us up early in our life
Yeah.
for hopefully a good financial future.
Hopefully. I mean,
anything could happen.
Yeah.
But
as we talk about buying very expensive depreciating assets that have skinny chopper blades.
2007 model.
Yeah. No, but that's also another thing too, is that helicopters, Robinson helicopters, are tied to the US dollar.
Yeah.
They're always going to be priced in US dollars because they're made in the USA.
Mm-hmm.
And as the exchange rate worsens for Canadians, every Canadian helicopter company or anyone who owns a helicopter, it just gets more expensive as the exchange rate gets worse.
Right.
So you get less bang for your buck. And that would be another cost prohibitive factor that would have factored in too. We still wouldn't have been able to afford that. So yeah.
It's interesting when you think about the opportunities, because I often like look at where we are now with not just like your job and your career, but like with our YouTube channel and like the connections that we have and the friendships that we've created over the years.
Yep.
Just from the internet. Like I always wonder, like, if we didn't move to Buffalo, would any of that have happened? Would we still be doing the same stuff, or would we have fallen back into that old, tried and true way of life with freelance and stuff? And like, if we had moved back, would I have found this thing that I love to do here? And would it be as successful, like doing YouTube and this podcast and doing it full time? Like, would that have been sustainable for me if we moved back, or would it have just fizzled out because of whatever?
Tough to say. Or would it have blossomed even more because you would have such a unique, relatively untapped, unseen place that is Newfoundland,
right,
as your backdrop?
Yeah.
And like, would that have worked in your advantage? Who knows?
Yeah.
Tough to say.
It's interesting because like when we went back, that like between when we were going to move to Buffalo and we left Vancouver and we moved back to Newfoundland for like 2 months, I found it difficult to film vlogs. And I don't know if it was because like mentally and that we had a lot of stuff going on, but it was like, oh, what's the video going to be this week? Because we were so used to like, okay, we're going to go this place this weekend, this place next weekend, this place the weekend after, and then we'll make a video about those things. But then coming home, it was like, oh, well, I don't really know what to film because it's like same old. And I always think about like, if we went home, would I have been like, well, I don't really know what to film, so I would just like not be consistent, and then like would the channel have fallen apart?
Who knows?
Because I feel like opportunities keep coming up for making videos, but like, is it because we live down here, or is
I think you would have figured it out and just made videos about different things.
Yeah, probably.
But I do think though that I'm a firm believer though that geographic separation, while it doesn't play as much of a role anymore now with the internet, it still plays a massive role for opportunity.
Yeah.
Like we never would have made the face-to-face connections that we've made pre-COVID.
Yeah.
With people here. Like, I mean, before COVID, like it's like, oh, you want to come down to our cottage, in like over in DC for the weekend?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, let's hop on a plane. We'll go down and hang out. Whereas like,
it would be impossible if we lived home.
Yeah. Newfoundland, it's like not just a lot further and a lot more connections, but like
expensive.
It's expensive and unreliable. Like if St. John's gets socked in with fog on Sunday night and you don't get back in, you have to be at work on Monday morning. That's a liability.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, totally. At least like down here, you could hop in the car and drive, which we've done multiple times.
Yeah. Yeah.
With weather and the helicopter and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Like that alone, you're right, is challenging. And I think about all the times, like with even camera camp, for example, or it's like, hey, do you want to come down? It's next month. And it's like, oh, well, Chris is working, so we can leave on Friday afternoon and take a direct flight or two flights, versus, okay, we can leave on Friday afternoon from Newfoundland, but if there's fog, we might not be able to get out for 2 days. And then we have to connect in Toronto, then connect somewhere else, and then connect to wherever we're going. And then it becomes expensive and a lot of flights, and if there's weather, and then you're like missing out because there's fog and you can't get off the island, and there's nothing you can do about that. Like you can't just drive to Gander because flights aren't going from Gander to Toronto, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know, so anyway, it's interesting. It's all interesting, but I definitely miss home, and I'm definitely homesick, and I wish that we could be home with family for the holidays, but unfortunately it is what it is. So we'll just have to make, you know,
we'll have our own special holiday.
We'll have our own special holiday, and we'll just have to make an effort once all this is over with to go home as often as we can or whenever we can and do the things that we would do if we were living at home and put them on our YouTube channel and appreciate the island.
So pros and cons of Buffalo as well as St. John's, Newfoundland, very different places. I think the take home though is just try to make the most of where you are and, you know, realize kind of like we did that location is just a location and it can be a special part of your identity, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah. And anybody can be happy anywhere.
Definitely. If you spend all your time wishing you were in a different place, you miss out on the opportunities and the cool things that are in the place you're at.
Yeah.
100%.
There you go. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah. Well, that was a cool topic suggestion. Thank you for sending us that. And again, if you guys have any more things that you want to hear us talk about, let us know in the comment section of this YouTube video. And if you're listening to your earbuds, hit us up on Twitter at Becki and Chris and just say, yo, bitches, you should talk about this thing. Sorry.
Can't put that in.
Well, I somebody complained about my swearing last time. So
oh, did they really?
I wanted to make sure I had extra swears in this one.
Part of your Newfoundland culture.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.